For folks who don't know, the Free State Project is a movement of voluntary human action where we are trying to concentrate libertarians in the state of New Hampshire.
I think we've done more in the last decade than every other libertarian movement combined has accomplished in the last 5 decades.
Are my friends and my neighbors who are willing to stand against tyranny, make their voices heard, and have a goddamn impact.
I have a problem with too many people are afraid to say what they believe in, let alone actually do something about it. If you're afraid to stand outside the TSA line and piss off 97% of people who are waiting to just take the arm builder up their ass in 5 seconds, then you're probably not ever going to make the change.
Free State Project, again, it's 1% of the Free State movement.
I am a friend of the Free State Project.
And would you encourage people to check it out?
Absolutely. Check it out. Find out. If you like it, join and continue the effort.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, libertarians, anarchists, activists, and people of the internet, thank you for tuning in to another episode of Free State Live, where you get to hear about all the ways you can live free or die in the free state of New Hampshire. But first and foremost, it's time to welcome back your hosts. I'm Justin O'Donnell, former Libertarian candidate for U.S. Senate and host of the O'Donnell Liberty for Liberty podcast. Joining me are activist and author Carla Garrick, board member of the Free State Project, Twitter antagonist and fellow board member of the Free State Project and CEO of Library, Jeremy Kaufman, and full-speed activist and New Hampshire native, Bill Barger. Tonight's going to be a fun show. We've got an eclectic group as always, so grab your popcorn, say hi in the live chat, and let's get the show on the road. And a quick note for those of you watching on other platforms, because we are live on YouTube, Facebook, and Odyssey, and will be available on all those platforms tomorrow, as well as on Spotify, where you can listen to the audio version. If you want to leave comments in the live chat on Facebook and YouTube, we can get them and bring them up and answer your questions on screen. On Odyssey, I'm going to be doing my best to pay attention to your chats and bring any relevant questions for people to answer, but it's not integrated with our restreamer just yet. But start things off, I know, Jeremy, you had some recent news you wanted to bring up and do your reaction to from the past week.
Well, we've been talking about this segment, which I don't think we've completely figured out yet, which I was proposing we call the weekly update. So it's just it's the biggest rees of the last week, because I think that, if you live in New Hampshire, you're going to experience more people upset with how much we're winning in a single week than most libertarians will experience in their entire lives. There were 4 or 5 op-eds just in the last week to the major newspapers in New Hampshire, writing about how frustrated they are by all of the libertarian victories here. And Moms for Liberty also put out this bounty, an incentive to catch teachers who were breaking the law and teaching race essentialism, so teaching that certain races are superior to one another. Critical race theory is sometimes used to refer to this. So this is now illegal only for public school teachers, of course, so it's only a restriction on government. But government teachers can no longer teach this in New Hampshire. And Moms for Liberty was like, let's catch one of these teachers. We know it's happening. They put out a $500 bounty, and it got major coverage. It was in Business Insider. It was in the Daily Beast. It was in Yahoo News. I heard it was in the Washington Post. Forbes. Yeah, I haven't even gotten to read some of these. But I think this is, it's got the teachers so upset. And when public school teachers are upset, generally that's a sign that you're winning. Not that you're looking to antagonize them by any means necessary, but most public school teachers are socialists, if not communists. And it's a great example of like this kind of effective liberty activism that's happening here. This was a small one tweet. Never doubt the power of Twitter. One tweet generated all of this attention. And another thing that it highlights is you've got these teachers from Massachusetts who are like, hey, come here, come teach here. We don't have these laws. And it's a great example of how strong this strategy is, because it puts progressives and libertarians on the same side. Progressives are saying, hey, progressives of New Hampshire, leave. That state's bad for you. Come over here. It's better. And so we're on the same side with the progressives, and that's part of the power of this movement. So yeah, that was definitely one of the biggest rees of the week. if not the biggest.
I definitely saw at least one woman on Twitter who went on and on and on about how her daughter is finishing up her master's in education in New Hampshire and was planning to go into work as a teacher in New Hampshire. And she's actively encouraging her to leave New Hampshire because libertarians are going to make teaching too dangerous.
So, yeah, look, some of this is lies, but it's absolutely it's incredible to the degree to which we're on the same side, because what they're really doing is they're highlighting how much we're winning here. They can't help themselves, but they're shining the spotlight. Moms for Liberty, social media following and membership doubled in the last week off of the basis of these posts. And I believe they got another like $2,000 in donations on top of the first 500. So I don't know. To me, it's a great example of the kind of like effective libertarian activism that you have here. People are fighters. People want to win. People aren't afraid. The libertarians here, you don't have to be afraid of being libertarian in New Hampshire. You don't have to wear your mask, right? A lot of libertarians don't like masks, but they actually wear one their whole lives. And when you move to New Hampshire, you get to take it off.
And we saw some of that unmasking on Friday night when, of course, we had hundreds of libertarians just show up for a random movie night. It was on the 12th of November, not remember the 5th, but I think next year.
Time. That's libertarian time.
Right. next year we'll try and make it on the 5th. But, it was just great. It was a rainy night and, we were kind of like, are we going to go? Are we not going to go? And it's like, why wouldn't I go watch, a great movie with, 120 of my closest friends. So, there's always something great and fun to do here. I think it's, we shouldn't lose sight with the Moms for Liberty and the bounty and that whole story that, of course, just to fill people in who may not know the whole history, right? So this is basically a bill that was introduced by Keith Emmon, who's a Free Stater who moved here many, many moons ago, probably 2008-ish. Who's done tremendous work. He's served at least 3 terms in the state house already. And, is married actually to a Chinese woman who, has the experience and has talked to someone like Lily Tang Williams, who moved out here, who was raised under CCP. So, people who kind of have a bit of a history about, knowing what to look for. So he championed the bill, and people can decide, I've heard criticism that says it's sort of anti-free speech. But I went and looked at the language of this bill, and really all this bill says is you can't, teach. It's very specific. It doesn't actually address CRT itself. It just kind of says, look, if there are these discriminatory things, we're not going to allow you to say these things. But then on top of the bill actually going and getting passed, we have to remember that, Frank Edelblue, who's now serving as the education commissioner, went and put up this website to follow the law. So the law says you guys aren't allowed to do this stuff. And, by the way, if it is happening, we want reporting. And he actually framed it, I thought, in a very reasonable and calm and rational way, which was, when people have complaints about doctors or lawyers or any other people, there are avenues where you can go. But there really is no avenue to go when you have a complaint about a teacher or what they're teaching or any kind of oversight, other, of course, than the school boards. So I think it's really a neat sort of from beginning to end story where this one thing started as a kernel here and has gone all the way through. And now nationally, people are hearing about the example of New Hampshire doing these really good things to just, to push back against some of the craziness. So it's, it's got the whole arc, as one could say.
So what do you guys think about the branding? And I see this already. It's like with all the news that's come from this, they're like smearing it as vigilantism or something for you to have an outlet through the government to report like that a public servant or a public official is not doing their job or violating the rules that they have been.
Look, it's the classic. It's the classic legacy media framing, right? If you go and burn down a building in the name of social justice, you're a protester. But if you attempt to enforce the law through the proper procedure, you're a vigilante, right? I mean, what it is these are the people who are upset about this are social justice warriors who want to teach race essentialism in our schools. And they're the people who are upset about it because they're not going to be able to get away with their bullshit in New Hampshire any longer, right? That's who's upset about this. Anyone who reads the language of this bill is not going to be offended by it. And you can see, by the way, that they never reply anytime, because you can see it on Twitter and these places. You say, which of these things do you want to teach? These people who are offended by the bill will absolutely never answer because the law does not ban anything that would be offensive. And remember, this is a restriction on government. These are public school teachers who are funded by our tax dollars. Now, as libertarians, would it be better if the public schools were not state funded and were funded either municipally only or did not exist? Like, that would be my preference, is that municipality is the largest government entity that's involved in the public schools. If we could do that, that'd be great. But right now, the state government is involved in public schools. The state government funds public schools, and it is right for the state government to hold public school teachers accountable. And now it would be great. I think the state government should say, hey, you can opt out of this bill if you want to reject school funding from us, right? Like, that would be nice. Because I use that policy. Yeah, right. Because I do think, like to me, localism is the answer when we have things done at the municipal level. A lot more from a libertarian framework, a lot more things are permissible at the municipal level than they are at the state level or the national level. In my view, that's personal view, not Free State Project view. And so, but this is in the same way that we want to restrict cops from doing bad things, we want to restrict teachers from doing bad things. And what teachers are restricted from doing here, these are bad things. So to me, it's a big win.
And of course, just to your point, Bill, the term vigilantism, right? So that goes down to the propaganda language and the sort of messaging that they're running with. Now, the hysteria from the left at this stage, I always feel sorry for them because I feel like they really overplayed their hand with Free Stater messaging. They called us domestic terrorists back in 2013. And, if I look at the sliding scale of their hate-filled terms, you get vigilante, you have extremists, like Justin has extremists on his Twitter handle, right? We could probably, between all of us, we could just throw out names and come up with them. But it feels like domestic terrorists must be like on the farthest end of some kind of hate spectrum, at least from a legal perspective. But they overshot their wad so hard, like 10 years ago, that they really have nowhere to go, right? So we know the terms that they throw out there when they're really in the hater sphere, they really like white supremacists. That's one that irks me. So, it's the one they'll use. But they have these terms that have just become meaningless. And so they'll say these things, but I have to imagine any thinking person who's still reading the paper has to, at this stage, just be like, what are these words? They mean nothing.
Right. When they say, like, decreasing taxes is actually white supremacy, like, wait a second, what?
Yeah, honestly, where I think I might even have said this before, but when they called Larry Elders the blackface of white supremacy.
Oh, that was so funny. That was so funny.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, I'm done. I don't care.
I'm definitely completely over it. I think we should probably move on from this topic, but just before we do, I wanted to read exactly what public school teachers can't do. So and remember, this is only public school teachers. Private schools can do this, and we have school choice here in New Hampshire now. You can get $5,000 a year to send your student to whatever school that you like, and you can actually still take government money and send them to schools that break this law. They just can't be public schools.
Government money is your money.
Yeah, right. So here's what public schools can't do. They can't teach that any racial group is inherently superior or inferior. They can't teach that any racial group is inherently racist, sexist, oppressive, whether consciously or unconsciously. And they can't teach that any racial group should be discriminated against or receive adverse treatment. That is just straightforward equality under the law, straightforward libertarian principles. And so this is, look, I don't think we want our public schools to teach communism, at least to encourage it. You don't want our public schools to be encouraging race essentialism. And that's what this is preventing, because that stuff's been happening, all over the country. And it has been happening a little bit in New Hampshire. It's stopping something real. So yeah, I think this is absolutely good. Are we going to questions next, or do we have more topics?
Well, you had sent me something else you wanted to talk about, and I think it's fascinating. Something showing that, even companies in New Hampshire, not just people in New Hampshire, are fighting back economically against state control, with the Utilities Commission rejecting the energy efficiency plan.
Oh, this is a good one. This is a great way of I've sometimes gotten criticism for this phrasing, but I called it weaponized libertarian autism, where you've got these libertarians who care about the fine details of stuff and who are going to focus and improve things in areas where people aren't paying attention. And so this is the opposite of the Moms for Liberty thing, where the Moms for Liberty thing generated a lot of heat over something that actually isn't that. I mean, it's not that huge. This is huge and is generating no coverage. So this is $350 million over the next 3 years are going to be returned to New Hampshire residents because a tax has been eliminated from their electricity bill. Now, they don't call it a tax; they call it a green energy fund. But this is like $100, more than $100 a year per resident are now going to be cut from their electricity bill, because there's this fund to fund green energy research. So everyone was paying a half a cent per kilowatt hour on their electricity bill, and it's being cut back or going away. So this is a big savings. This isn't getting any press coverage, but this is a great example of libertarians in New Hampshire being focused on stuff that matters. And this is saving a lot of money for New Hampshire residents. And it's tough for me to keep track of it. And I have a little bit of that weaponized libertarian autism, and it's tough for me to keep track of all of it. There are so many small things that are being done here. And this is a big thing, but it's small in terms of it doesn't get any attention. So I think this is a great win. This is a great example of there are so many examples like this with the microbrewery laws and the knife laws and the occupational licensing and all these little things that are being done by all the activists here.
Yeah.
I mean, if they just, go ahead.
I was just going to say, on that note, I know we had attempted to put out a call-in link where people could leave us voicemails that we could answer as questions on the stream, but I didn't get that set up till today, so we didn't get much traction on it yet. But we did have some questions come in from the Discord channel that people wanted. One of them, I think, is kind of directly related to what Jeremy just touched on. It was forwarded to me. I don't know who asked it. It was forwarded to me by Southern Northeast, but the question is, what realistically would be the most effective legislative action that could be taken to dissuade progressives from coming here and encouraging them to leave? Something that they would find so utterly repulsive that they couldn't tolerate being here, but would still be in harmony with libertarian principles.
Well, we all got to wear our personal hats on this one. So I don't know. I don't want to be on the record.
I'll go first.
I want to have a professional career.
So one, I'll say that just in the last year, I would say that two of the top things happened. It's clear from the ban on the race essentialism, CRT, whatever you want to call it, that has gotten a lot of progressives really upset. And you can see there were a bunch of progressives saying stay out of New Hampshire, and that's great. Another one, and I'm actually against this personally, I'd say free staters are generally pretty divided on abortion. I don't know. I'd say it's pretty close to 50-50. I'm actually pro-choice, which may surprise some people, but I'm pro-choice. And we did just ban late-term abortions. I'd be mildly against that. It's not a big deal for me, but I would be against it. But boy, does that have the wrong kinds of people upset. The wrong kinds of people, the people we don't want here, are very upset about that ban. And it's only a ban on abortions after 24 weeks. So very, very late term. It's 1% of abortions or less happen at this stage. But it has gotten people. So those just happened, and those have gotten people upset. This one might be, I don't know how people would feel about the libertarianism of this one, but this came up. I was on Pete Quinona's show, and he was talking about what would you do to keep progressives from moving in as you build a free society. And he was talking about like having, some kind of like pledge, a loyalty pledge. And I'm not necessarily endorsing this idea, but I think it is a really good question because as New Hampshire is going to get more and more successful as we make it more and more free. How do we make sure we don't have people come here and corrupt it is a very good question, because until we get rid of democracy, or unless we get rid of democracy, not everyone wants to do that, you're going to run the risk of democracy ruining what you've built, as in my opinion, it ruined America. So one option is to have something that people have to promise, basically like that you literally by living in this, if you move here, you have to promise that you are going to, respect certain things. You're going to respect private property. You're going to respect voluntary association. You're going to respect bodily autonomy. Like I would love to make it so that if you move to New Hampshire, you have to promise that you are going to endorse certain libertarian values.
So I heard a really good one. This is not my idea. And I don't, this would be like, it had to be up to the people of New Hampshire. This isn't like necessarily purely libertarian, but it's along the same lines where it's a bit of like, it's maybe not a verbal pledge, but what are progressives super duper afraid of? Guns. And so if you were to have, and I wish I could remember who came up with this idea. They're like, if you were to have like a mandatory gun ownership, or like if you're going to have a house, or if it was going to be, maybe you have to like at least take a certain number of classes in gun ownership, just like if you're going to have your license or whatever, just like to get people, if you come here and you're going to live here, you have to be able to fire a gun. Yeah.
This verges into hurting your principles, sort of just to own the left, right? Because let's be honest, under libertarian theory, I should be free to contract and have a private. I don't need to know how to fire a gun. I can contract with my security force. My security force is going to protect me, So I do think we should. But I agree with you in terms of what will piss these people off the most.
What about the idea, maybe, if we're going to be responsible for our own protection, that you have to in some way be like, all right, what are you doing? Security or whatever? Maybe, I don't know. That's again creates like some checklist or something, but like, what are you doing? Security for your home? Like, how are you going to make sure you're protecting your part of the neighborhood?
Oh, and remember, while the power madness goes to your minds here, my fellow libertarians, that every little rule you're going to make right now has to be enforced by the barrel of a gun. But basically, you guys are talking about the Switzerland model, right? Every canon there, everyone has to do compulsory conscription. Every Swiss person has a gun in their home. Switzerland is also the only country in Europe who has maintained their neutrality over the years. So maybe not the worst of the models, but it's. We should also just remember that not everyone is politically obsessed, and that a lot of our neighbors just honestly also share the live and let live sort of ethos. So I understand that we're in this like death match with the progressives, but a lot of people also probably just won't care as long as you're a good neighbor. And, and I think philosophically, or at least culturally, we could say, the mind your own business, live and let live, trying to encourage those culturally, and just put out the vibe of, if you're not personally responsible and you kind of want to mooch off other people, this is not the place for you. And then make sure there aren't services, because then that solves the problem.
Justin, what's your answer?
So I think Stephen Nass actually has the correct answer in chat. We keep them out by building a really strong culture of liberty. People don't want to go live in a culture that clashes with their personal identity too much. And I believe like that's the real answer is culture, is by getting more people here who believe in our values, more people who share our values, and growing our libertarian community. The left doesn't want to have neighbors that disagree with them. And you don't have to use laws to impose your cultural standards on people. You can use social pressure to do that. And by building libertarian communities and growing a larger libertarian community, we don't need a legislative answer. People will leave on their own.
Yeah, I think that's like kind of a non-answer. Yeah.
It is an unanswered, but my thing is, like, to Bill's point with guns, when constitutional carry passed in New Hampshire, it was a big deal. The left freaked out about it. The left lost their minds over it. Now it's a nothing burger.
Sure.
Now it's become so normalized to them that they don't even talk about it except in the legislature.
Yeah. Well, all right. And some people are saying that here's just to, and I don't know if we have much longer we want to even cover the subject, but the thing that
I have one more idea.
Okay, well, the thing that I look at, the reason that I'm not convinced that culture alone will do it is you had culture in the United States that was very libertarian several hundred years ago. Okay, now they were different in other ways. Times were different back then, but I don't think you can really argue that America had a much smaller government in the 1700s and 1800s than it does today, and so that was not sufficient, right? Like over time, whether you want to blame democracy or whether you want to blame something else, like the sort of libertarian nature of colonial America, and of course it was not perfectly libertarian. There's plenty to complain about, but it was certainly more libertarian, I think, than we have today. It did degrade. And you will have people who will move for economic opportunity who continue to hold their beliefs. And, what stops it from decaying again? I think that is a really good question to be asking. I don't know that we have to be able to answer it tonight on the show, but I think
it will always decay. It's the human condition. It is the yin and the yang, and it will always be and forever be. So we just either are on the upswing of liberty or on the downswing of liberty. And that's just how it is. I mean, over time, hopefully we can start to get people together who share those values, which is exactly what we're trying to do. The nut that we should not crack tonight, but that we should try and figure out sometime is the problem with the model is we know our ideas will lead to peace and prosperity. And I think the problem is the other people know that too, which means they can't actually kind of let you exist. Because if we had Vermont and New Hampshire next to each other and one's super prosperous and it does it one way and the other one isn't, will someone not scratch their head and wonder? And then they'll come marching back in. Except with Bill's proposal, we will all be somehow armed and very peacefully make it all go away. All right, changing subjects.
My final proposal, we don't have to talk about it, nullify federal health care. That'll really scare them away.
Yes.
Actually, that's a great suggestion. And actually nullify all the stuff we can, right?
Actually, secession was the best answer. No one gave it. Secession.
Yeah,
if you want to
secession, that's correct. Okay. Even I will agree. Legislatively, secession is the correct answer.
Nullify all federal laws.
All right. Changing the subject, moving on from there. Another question from chat. Breaking the Flaw. Joa asks, what's the panel's opinion of filming police, and what suggestions would we give to those who do? I think this is a great panel for this because I think Bill might be the only one here who hasn't been arrested while filming the police.
Well, we got to give it to the Queen first because I think she has the most.
Carla is famous for getting arrested while talking to the police.
Indeed. What are my thoughts on filming the police? I think if we're talking about libertarian culture, I think it's something everyone should always do. I think if we can make New Hampshire the state where it is just known that if the blues go on somewhere, someone in the state is going to pull in next to them, take out their camera and film it, we will be in great shape. You know what that would do? That would keep our police officers safe and honest. And it would also keep dirtbags from being dirtbags. So I think it would be a win all around. I do think there are better and worse ways of doing it. I know in my own case, I did let them know I was audio and video recording. New Hampshire is a dual consent state, which technically means they're supposed to get both parties' consent in order to film. Although really, I think we've kind of turned that on its head. I personally don't like to interfere. I always feel like it's a heightened sort of situation as well. So I like to sort of take the I'm bearing witness role and stuff. And if the question is coming from the person I think it's coming from, I know that there was a situation down at the polling station. So here in New Hampshire, we have one of these crazy things where you can show up to go vote and you can carry a gun, even into a school. to go vote because we're awesome. And so over the years, sometimes the officers who work at the polling stations may not know that, or they just kind of get a heart attack because they're like, what the hell's happening? And they get a bit of a brain fart. And then you have to school them. Now, I like the polite approach personally, but that could be a personal preference. And I understand other people do things differently. But I think when it's sort of in an environment where the people, maybe like trying to do it as a teaching moment is better than like a hardcore confrontational thing. I've found over the years that when it gets really confrontational, it doesn't really go that well. But different people have different styles. I will say this as well. I've learned over the years, if something's going down that I just am not psyched about, I just won't jump in. I'll let the person do their activism, and that's part of what we're allowed to do, right? So different people will do it in different ways. I've done cop blocking where, it's escalated to a level where, someone's getting arrested who's just some poor bystander because of the way the activists were acting. So I think you always have to be mindful of a few things. One is, it's like, what's going down? Is everyone safe? Two is, who's the audience? Who is this playing for? And then you obviously want to look as presentable or as good as you can on the video, because folks, if you film police officers and they take your footage, take your camera, tell you can't do any of that stuff, that is worth good money in New Hampshire because we have made it so, because of the efforts not only of me, but also because of, Cop Block was started here originally, Ademo and Pete. We have activists who've gone and come back and done it. So, I'm in favor of it. But I think it needs to be done as politely as you can under the circumstances. But again, that's kind of how I am. So different people, different strokes, different folks.
So the full story on Carla, just I don't know if everyone knows it, is that Carla was arrested for filming the police, went all the way to the circuit court, right? The circuit court of
First Circuit, yeah.
First Circuit Court. Carla won her case, and Carla also won a settlement from the police department for arresting her, really cementing the right to film the police in New Hampshire. And as I understand it, the two-party thing only applies to phone calls. Public officials do not have an expectation of privacy, and so it is okay to film them even without their explicit permission. I'm not a lawyer, so don't take that as legal advice, but that's my understanding. I'll tell my story briefly about, and I agree with Carla. You try to film them politely. I had moved to New Hampshire. Maybe I'd been here for like a couple of years, but I was not like really this activist type person before I came here. And I was encouraged by all these things that people were doing. And I came home from work on a Friday, and the house that I owned, which I still own, although I don't live in it, has this like L-shaped back alley. So there's the back alley that goes to my parking space, and it's like an L. So you can imagine an L like intersecting a major street. And I got home, and the police had blocked off both sections of the alley. So I was effectively trapped in my house. I could not leave with my car. And I went to talk to the police officer, and he ordered me to stay in my house, and said that I basically wasn't allowed to leave my property. This seemed ridiculous to me, and so I was like, okay, this is my chance. I'm a free stater now. I'm gonna do my activism. And so I pulled out my cell phone. I recorded them. I had a conversation with them. Like Carla said, I tried tried to be polite. I tried to remain calm, and basically was asking him questions about why I wasn't allowed to leave my property. What was the order for that? How is that valid? I'm not allowed to leave my my house. Like, I'm not I'm willing to, say that I assume all risks for leaving my house and so on. Because evidently they had said that there was a shooting like a block away, or there was someone barricaded, but it was like a block away from my house. So I was like, well, I feel comfortable with that risk. Like, let me leave. Like, no, he's not going to shoot me randomly in the car. And they arrested me for attempting to leave my house, for attempting to walk down the street.
What were you charged with?
Oh, disobeying, of course, the catch-all.
Yeah. So I was charged with that. In my case, they, at the advice of my libertarian lawyer, he said that I probably was breaking the law, and they agreed to drop the charges, and it just kind of went away. So unfortunately, mine did not go quite as well as Carla's. I wasn't able to set a pro-liberty precedent in my case. But I did hopefully, bring some attention to the fact that police are doing this kind of thing. Maybe motivated some people to realize that this is a bad idea. I wouldn't give myself an A grade on this activism, honestly, but I did try. And there certainly is a culture here that's pro, take your camera out and record what's going on.
Yeah,
I was at the bar the other day.
In 2018, I was helping a libertarian candidate in Massachusetts petition for ballot access. And we ended up getting in a kind of an altercation with the Republican candidate at a gun show where they said no politics, no campaigns. I'm like, how come he's allowed in, but we're not? And my friend started filming. And the candidate for attorney general called the cops on us and accused us of wiretapping and had us arrested. And we sat outside for several hours arguing with the cops until a libertarian law type was arguing with the lieutenant who had been called down to deal with us and cited both Glick and Carla's case. They got us let go. And I'm sitting there I wanted to get paid. What the hell?
And of course, it sucks because the taxpayer is actually the person who gets punished, right, in this scenario. So certainly, wearing my personal hat, one of the policy things I'd love to see us do is to really try and move some of the occupational, I guess it's occupational licensing, but any of the public service stuff, so police officers, teachers, whatever, if we do start to shift it to this more reform/professional model, we just opened up police accreditation, and if they get decertified, those hearings are now open in New Hampshire for the first time ever. And I think that's a big deal. And if activists are watching this and you're kind of looking for what could be your little thing that you could do, if that's something you're interested in, I'm looking for help with that kind of stuff. I think we should have an activist who is sitting in on every police certification, decertification hearing, so that we're making sure we're collecting the names, we're double checking them against the Lori's list and all of that. There's a ton of work here. We've made a lot of progress, and I'm really proud of that case, as I've mentioned before as well, because police officers don't have qualified immunity for it. But I think culturally, if we can encourage everyone, I want across the street from me to be doing it too. I think it should just be something that if people ask in 20 years, hey, what's something that's uniquely New Hampshire? It'd just be oh man, everyone there, man, shit pops when the cops stop. Everyone's just filming. It's a thing. Maybe we have a station and we just have a reality TV cop station that you can just live stream there, and we could just watch it as a show. I don't know.
And at some point.
Oh, yeah, go ahead, Bill.
I was just going to say, at some point, people should feel comfortable if a cop is really doing something unjustified, doing more than just filming it. At some point, people should feel comfortable with that. Maybe you don't. Maybe you won't. But in 20 years, if that was a uniquely New Hampshire thing, it's the citizens are more willing to enforce the law than the cops are. How about that? Oh,
yeah. But in 20 years, I'm hoping it's really by that stage, we're just going to have the drones, right, flying. And
oh yeah, that's what you're hoping for.
No, that's not what I'm hoping for. In fact, if we could just get one message that we should all be saying all the time. I say this to my progressive friends and colleagues all the time. I'm what is the future you want to be building? Because these maniacs are like, I'm like, is this the future you want? Because this is what you are creating, your RoboCops and your drones and your jabs and your, like, all of it, you know? And when we remind them that that isn't the future you want, you don't want this crazy totalitarian future, they generally agree. So that's a good little meeting point with them.
Yeah, I will say, like, cops know free staters. They know who they are. They don't necessarily know like who everyone is, but they know.
Oh, they have us in the database.
Right. Yeah, well, you are. I probably am now too. Carla certainly. Carla has a flag on her. When they pull her up, they're like, "Do not trouble this person."
Oh, they don't pull me over anymore.
No, I mean, look, cops are no different than any other self-interested bureaucrat. They have a position. They like their position. They want to keep collecting their salary. Okay. And cops understand that giving free staters trouble brings risk to them because they understand that free staters fight. They know their rights. They're going to record things and they will go to court even quixotically to attempt to win. And it's like, if you're a cop, why you have to be, why would you take that challenge on? Why would you bear that risk? So there absolutely is a culture of filming cops here. Cops are aware of free staters, and they are, essentially a little bit worried about them. And also, please don't take this as a pro cop sentiment. But cops here are also better than cops I've dealt with anywhere else in the country. They've been more reasonable to me. They've been fairer to me. They haven't given me trouble for things where I'm like, man, if I was in Philadelphia, I would have gotten a ticket for that. So I do think there is like, look, cops here are even like the cops here are on the like anti-vax mandate side of things, and so not universally, but like. So there is a culture here that has caused the cops to be aware of free staters and I think to improve their behavior.
Yeah, and honestly, also, let's not collectivize. I think the one important thing that I've sort of internalized over the years is, in the same way I hate it when everyone says free staters and then it's all of us and you get, the stank on you sometimes when you don't want it. Police officers are individuals as well. There are bad cops. Of course, we know it. There might even be an epidemic of bad cops, but there are also good cops. And, I've certainly had some good experiences in the state as well. And again, it becomes that cost of doing business. Someone asked me years ago, do you think you're more or less likely to get pulled over if you have a porcupine on your car? And I was like, 10 years ago, you might have been more likely. But honestly, now I'm starting to think, I don't know if you guys remember that trend for a while. I don't know if it was a trend, but it seemed like there were an awful lot of cars that had thin blue stickers on. And I was like, oh, is that like a ghetto, get out of jail free? Like you just buy one and you stick it on your car and then cops leave you alone. And I was like, oh, that's clever. Maybe I should get one of those, right? But then I was like, nah, my car is covered in porcupines. And people were like, oh, aren't you scared you're going to get pulled over? And I'm like, no, I think a porcupine on your car is a very clear, nonviolent, naply way of just being like, look, mother, leave us just don't pull me over. I'm not worth your time.
It's not a fish sticker. Okay. It's not a fish sticker.
So get this. My brother was hanging out with somebody the other day. I guess it was like a former coworker, and they had some friends over or something. There's a police officer there. He's off duty. He's hanging out, and they mentioned like my brother mentioned like, oh, my brother's been getting into the Free State Project, and I guess this officer's like, I actually kind of lean libertarian. I'm like, okay, so so I have this whole thing about like cops saying they lean libertarian, maybe in New Hampshire more than other places, but that's like Fauci saying he's an animal rights activist when he's not having beagles like vocal cords removed and having them eaten by sandflies. But so they were saying, I don't know if you guys know this, I guess the police in New Hampshire, for the most part, most police departments, they won't hire free staters. They have like it's an unofficial policy, like. that they won't hire Free Staters. If they find out that you're associated with the Free State Project, it's like, we're not doing it. And maybe this is the same thing. It's like, well, we don't want somebody filming. They're already filming the outside of our organization. We definitely don't want them filming the inside of our organization.
I mean, I would love to actually, get a firmer handle on that. I think that we probably have some kind of class action suit situation that could easily be parsed out. Over the years, we've heard different rumors over the years. So amongst other things, when I was arrested, when I went to court that morning, when they null-prossed my charges, and I was charged with wiretapping, which carries a 7-year sentence, disobeying an officer, some kind of not obeying your government gods or something, I don't know. They kept slapping new charges on, right? But when I got to court that morning, the bailiff at the court actually had a list, and a friend of mine, William, got arrested with me because he came in. Well, anyway, so we were both arrested, and then on the list, they actually had FS written next to our names. And when I went to check in, I was like, hey, what is that FS for? Is that for Free Stater? And he's like, yeah. And I was like, oh, where else do you flag Free Staters in things, right? And over the years, I've heard different answers, but there is apparently a database. There is definitely training that happens at the police center in Concord. There's FEMA training that happens. I mean, can I find all of it? No. Would the honest cop in New Hampshire like to be the whistleblower? Much like I would like to ask anyone who is a honest cop or an honest prosecutor who would like to leak the Lori's list so that we can believe that you actually are pro-reform and not just blowing smoke. So, we'd be open to talking to anyone who can help us show that. The other thing that sort of ties together with that, which I haven't been able to prove yet, but what I would love to, is why no Free Staters get called for jury duty after that one time we nullified their entire pot case against the white Rastafarian.
Oh, that is very interesting. So I will say, this continues to back up my claim that libertarians are the most oppressed minority. We're the only minority that it's okay to oppress and discriminate against. And maybe this ties it back to the earlier question of what would drive the progressive the most insane. We need to make libertarians a protected class.
I haven't been saying that for years.
We're less than 13% of the population.
Yeah. I mean, look, I was born this way. Okay. I'm serious. This is one of my favorite topics that people don't like, but I really think I was born libertarian the same way that people were born gay. I was wired this way. I've always had these issues with, with authority or wanting to do things my own way, and, not, wanting things to be voluntary or whatever. My parents didn't teach me that. I mean, my parents were accepting of it, but it wasn't instilled in me. It was something within me. And, and so it is true. That we're being probably true that we're being discriminated against here in New Hampshire, and we need to make ourselves a protected class and stop this kind of thing.
Oh yeah, I fully support that notion. I wanted to do it a little differently years ago with the, what was your term, weaponized autism? Is that what you said? because I'm like, you guys don't get mean. Why are they so mean to some of us are very special.
I know one Free Stater who has been called for jury duty since moving here, and they're unknown. They're a very active Free Stater, and in a group chat they sent a message like, God damn, I got called for jury duty again. This is bullshit. And talked about burning their jury summons and just ignoring it. And everyone freaked out. It's like, why aren't you going to jury duty? It's the easiest form of activism you can do. And he's like, I just don't want to. It's like the one person they called is the one person who doesn't want to do it.
Yeah, and just, for folks following along, jury nullification and jury nullification outreach was something we did a lot of back in the day. And we would go to the courthouses at 8 in the morning. It'd be dark in the winter, and you're just out there with you're handing out stuff. So And that's where it started. So that's, again, one of those examples where it starts with a kernel of activists saying, oh, I'm going to go do this thing, right? And we know that juries have a lot of power, of course, because jury nullification means you could say, well, yeah, technically someone broke the law, but come on, that's a stupid law, right? That's how they ended prohibition. That's how we did weed and all of that, right? So then we actually passed a jury nullification law, which made it law in New Hampshire that the judge has to inform the jury that they have this right. Because before that, the courts would just kind of like gloss over it, and they put it in the jury instructions, and the two sides could fight about it, and they sort of obfuscate. They'd make it really hard for the jury to understand that they're allowed to do this thing. And so by enshrining it in the law, they made it very clear. So that was another like massive positive win for everyone in the state. It's a win for the progressives and people who want criminal justice reform just as much as it's a win for, honestly, I don't think the conservatives really liked it that much, but it's a win for liberty. And here's the thing, whenever we're fighting with people on the internet, I'm just constantly amazed because these people are like, you are monsters. They want more liberty. And I'm always like, why is that a bad thing? Like, why is wanting more people to have more freedom bad? Can someone explain that to me?
The biggest thing I see them saying is like, well, that's national money with a national agenda. I'm like, yeah, libertarians, the biggest like national grassroots movement. You've seen how they poll. National polls.
They're complaining about
what a huge secret dark movement.
What 1.4 million? That's what they're complaining about, right? Like that's the money they could trace that they're saying came into the. It's a lot more. Anyway, I'm not
how many
sure
billions
it is.
of crypto?
Right? Who knows? I know nothing, but. Oh, and if I get tortured, I'm blabbing everything, okay? Just so everyone's on the record. So you all know.
Billions in crypto.
My solution is to just not have secrets. But the answer to your question, and I actually think this is something a lot of libertarians don't like to acknowledge, but I try to get them to. Most people are not libertarians. Most people will never become libertarians. Being a libertarian is not this like rationally decided thing in the same way that being gay is not. Like you didn't wake up, you didn't when you discovered libertarian argumentation, you were like, this is correct. And it might have been Ayn Rand, or it might have been Friedman, or it might have been Rothbard, or it might have been all these people. But once you got exposed to it, you're like, this is correct. And you can give that same material to someone who is not, sort of wired the same way that you are. And they won't buy it at all.
But I don't think logic is wiring. Logic is actually like a form of A, B, C. I mean, it is. So we're very rational, right? Because we're logical people. And so I'm not sure I fully agree with you.
Well, what I'm saying is you weren't reasoned into being a libertarian. You weren't. It's something that you needed to see the right kind of argument to expose it to you, and it made it click for you if you hadn't heard the ideas before. But it was not like there's not some generic. This is why the Libertarian Party, in my opinion, continues to fail, because it has this idea that we can persuade the majority of Americans to be libertarian, and our political beliefs are not that persuadable. Like the reason that people have sort of socialist style beliefs is because they want certain outcomes, and they don't care about the means to getting them. And they're not going to necessarily buy into, they're not going to buy into them. So it's not, it's closer to something like, what kind of ice cream do you like in terms of how do you want to live your life, and what kind of government do you like? And it's not this kind of thing that's like a math equation where there's this objectively correct answer.
But for this, I mean, because I come from a legal background, right? So the law, up until a point when they started redefining words and saying, excluding means including and all of that, the law actually was supposed to be the logic, right? Like it was the way we wrote down, this is what we agree to. And when the words all made sense on the page, the world still made sense. But it really, for me in any event, and that was the big aha moment for me, which I think a lot of scientists and nerds and engineers and people are going through now with all the COVID and the data and the corruption of the scientific world. I went through that like come to Jesus moment like 20 years ago with the legal system, where I was like, holy crap, like it can't work anymore. We can't have rule of law if we don't have logically following words that make sense together on a page. And so when you talk about, America was more libertarian back in the day, I think that's correct. And I think that's why we can actually persuade a lot of our neighbors. Yes, not, if you're like full Mao, Che commie, fine. But I actually think libertarianism is quite close to the old-fashioned American middle class, to be honest.
I really agree with that. So what I'll say is, like, I think it does take a certain set of, maybe the word I'm looking for, the frame I'm looking for is moral frameworks. You're not going to convince somebody who believes that the collective is more important than the individual, that libertarianism is the way. You're not going to get that person on board. But somebody who's like a conservative, who's like, well, we have to have, I don't know, whether it's like the military to keep it defended from all these wars overseas. Look, what if we weren't fighting over there? Would we be fighting over here? It's like, I think those people are closer. And you have to get, there's like a moral framework of like, we shouldn't, it's fucked up that I frame it that way, because those people are also advocating that we're killing people overseas, which is, I totally don't agree with that at all.
But we're going to put them all on our southern border, keep those massholes out.
But those people at least have the idea or the concept in their minds that we're doing something bad overseas to keep whatever's here good. And it's like, no, we could keep whatever's here is good without doing bad things overseas. And like, but they're like, it's almost like they have this belief that there's a trade-off that we need to make, that if we don't make, we won't be able to be free. I'm like, I think we would maybe be freer. We'd be spending less of our money, et cetera. But you have to have the moral framework that actually freedom and personal choice and the individual matters more than the collective. So like the whole socialist communist thing, it's really hard to sell those people on liberty. I mean, you see Dr. Fauci on TV saying like, oh, I knew that Trump was going to be talking about these obscure rights of the individual, which like obviously is not as important as when you have a collective of people in a society that you need to be protecting. The society's principles or privileges take precedent over your privileges. Like, Dr. Fauci, you're coming right out of like a some kind of a book on like destroying the individual. I don't know. It's like, it's very Eastern thought at the very least. Whether, I'm not going to say it's directly communist thinking from Fauci, but it's like very Eastern, like the collective comes before you. You're here to uphold the collective.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always confused when people talk about the collective, because I'm just like, well, what makes up the collective, right? Like that seems like such an easy one to parse out, because it's like the collective is only the sum of its parts, and its parts are all individuals. So again, I just feel like they can't win that argument, although apparently they are. So I know we're going to have to wrap up soon, so I'm going to go first and then let you guys take it out. We have a bunch of stuff coming up this week. For the regulars, there's Tap Room Tuesday, tomorrow night at Tap Room. That's at Murphy's in downtown Manchester. On Wednesday, I'm sure there's something going on, but I didn't write it down. On Thursday, there are several things happening. We have Patty's Seacoast Meetup. That is for folks out on the Seacoast. There are two Liberty Summits happening at the same time. There is one on cannabis happening at the Murphy's in downtown Manchester. There is also a one taking place, which is a Reopen Rebuild Summit. That'll be at the Murphys in Bedford. For folks who do not know, the Murphys are also Free Stater owned, so you are supporting good Free Stater liberty businesses. On Friday.
When is that happening?
Oh, that's on Thursday night. Also,
both at the same time?
Mm-hmm, yeah. Okay. So And you can go to Rebuild New Hampshire to get more information on that. On Friday, during the day in Concord, we have the New Hampshire Noble 9. Those are the 9 people who were arrested by our executive King Sununu, and people will be making their displeasure known there. So that's at 8 a.m. in Concord on Friday. There is also a 10 a.m. fiscal meeting for $27,000 on Friday. And those are just the things I know of, which have nothing to do with the millions of things I do. You can follow me at carlagarrick.com and buy my book.
It's pretty nonstop. If you're here in New Hampshire, you can go to something almost every day if you want to, which makes it very easy to visit. That's our top recommendation. If you think there is even a 2% chance that the Free State Project is a great strategy, come and check it out and update your probability after you gather some real on the ground.
We are irresistible.
Yeah, so you can come any time of year. There are 3 events that I want to highlight in the next 3 months. So if you want to come, if you have a lot of flexibility in when you come, maybe you need to book a flight. Here are some great times to come. We have a tour of the Seacoast and a Robbie the Fire comedy night, as well as a bunch of events on the Seacoast. This is I want to say it's the third weekend in December.
It's the 18th of December. Yeah.
The 17th through the 19th. It's the whole weekend.
Okay. And the more info for that is at seacoastwelcome.org. In February, we have the 500th weekly crypto meetup. That's right. It is the longest running weekly crypto meetup in the entire world. Free Staters were very early on Bitcoin. I sometimes say that the best time to move to New Hampshire was 2011, and the second best time is today. But it's the 500th meetup, and a bunch of crypto people are going to be there. If you're into crypto, this is a great time to come out. And I think they're going to end up being events the whole weekend. That's freestatecrypto.com to get tickets for that. And then I think the biggest of them is Liberty Forum the first weekend in March. NHLibertyForum.com. If you're the kind of person who says, like, I want to understand the New Hampshire magic, I want to be in office in 2 years, I want to get bills passed, I want to make the state freer, this is going to be all the people who are involved in making shit happen are going to be at this event. It'll be fun too. We'll drink some beers, we'll have some fun. But the people here, the legislators, the policy people, the New Hampshire Liberty Alliance, the secret ninjas of New Hampshire Liberty, they're all going to be there, and that's NHLibertyForum.com. So please check out one of those 3 things. It's a great time to come out if you're curious about the Free State Project.
Bill, where can people follow you and check out you? What are you up to?
Hey, follow me on Twitter or Facebook. Bill is a joke. Yeah, it's a very serious account you'll be following. And then just go to all the New Hampshire things. I make all the graphics for like everybody at this point. If you see the graphics for the sample of Seacoast thing, that's mine. Just go follow all of them. Follow the Mises Caucus of New Hampshire. Follow the Libertarian Party of New Hampshire, and the Free State Project, of course. Yeah, come say hi. Come visit.
And again, you guys can follow me at O'Donnell4NH or over on the O'Donnell for Liberty podcast here on YouTube and Odyssey, as well as Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and everywhere else. And make sure you hit the subscribe button on this video if you're watching for the first time or if you're new here. And go check us out. Again, there's a link in the description. If you guys want to leave us a voicemail that we can answer on air next week or in future shows, there's a link to do that in the description of this video on both YouTube and Odyssey. And make sure you hit that subscribe button elsewhere. But until next time, be free.
Peace out, guys.
A nice place to